Welcome to Tech Smarter. My name is Abby Ritchie. I am the tech guru with the Smarter service, and you can find me right here every Wednesday talking with innovators, operators, and investors who are shaping the future of aging services. This episode today is sponsored by Leading Age Arizona, and the show is brought to you by the Smarter service. Now, if you're an operator and your residents continue to corral staff in the hallways with their tech questions, and we all know their questions have questions. And if you are experiencing this growing need of tech support for your residents, I want you to reach out to us and let us help you professionalize this growing demand. Now, today we are joined by truly a visionary who is redefining what the aging services experience looks like. I have Leslie Sweeney with us. Leslie, welcome to Tech Smarter.
Good morning, Abby. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, you too. You too. Leslie is the executive force behind the platform that integrates the best of IN2L and LifeLoop. And Leslie, for anyone who's not familiar with your journey, would you please share with us how you got into this industry and what you're currently working on?
I'll make it somewhat short. About 26 years ago, back when no touchscreens were available, people had a mouse. I got a computer, didn't really know what to do with it or how to use it, but I started playing around with it. And I had 3 young children at the time. And so I felt a little bit isolated myself because it's hard to get out of the house with young children. And I was making connections through virtually with a running group, with a discussion group. And so I thought, well, what other population might feel isolated? And the senior population popped into my head. And I went to my friend, Jack York, and said, hey, I have this idea. Will you supply a computer and I will donate my time at a senior living community? So I found a senior living community in Long Beach that was willing to take a free computer and free volunteer time. And I spent about a year working with the residents, and they loved it. Initially, people were telling me, no, they're too old. They're not going to be interested. It's too hard. They're not going to understand. And couldn't have been more wrong. They loved it. So that's when Jack and I decided, hey, we can make something out of this. What should we do? And how do we do it? And neither one of us with any experience in senior living, and that was probably a good thing, because if we would have said, no, this is not a good idea. And so we dove in, and with a lot of help and support and our early adopters giving us advice and suggestions, we created IN2L.
I just love this backstory. And one thing I'm hearing you saying, which is prevailing, is the myth that older adults don't want to use technology or not interested. Now, they've been saying this for so long, right, Leslie?
Right.
And there's no doubt in my mind that after COVID, this myth should have been debunked completely. But I feel for you because
Abby, I think your mic is off.
Okay, I feel for you. My mic just fell down. So tech happens, right? I feel for you because to be dealing with this myth for so long and knowing it is absolutely 100% not true has got to be very challenging over the years.
Exactly. And especially back then when we didn't have touchscreens. Touchscreens were such a great innovation, because when people were like, oh, people aren't being interested. Well, they can use a microwave. They can use an ATM. They can use a touchscreen on a computer and learn, connect, all kinds of stuff. So
I love that. I love it. And in your years of working with older adults, one thing that I have noticed and would love your opinion on is the fact that social isolation just continues to be a public health crisis for so many. And I know that you've seen the data firsthand. Beyond the emotional toll, what is the single most damaging effect that unaddressed social isolation has on the physical and mental well-being of an older adult?
I would have to say the acceleration of cognitive decline that directly leads to increased dementia and an increase in um, premature mortality. Because with the increase in dementia, it kind of amplifies all the other health risks. People aren't taking their medications, they're not doing self-care, there's a high risk of falls. So all that leads to a premature mortality. So it's a decline in the cognitive, I think, is the main.
I saw so much of this, unfortunately, at the end of COVID or at the end of 3 years of 2 years of COVID. There were people that I was working with one on one prior to COVID and, doing tech support and, and helping them. And then after COVID, just seeing how much they had declined in the past couple of years due to social isolation. It was staggering. And I really feel for them. Not only that, but our ability to serve them through technology decreased significantly. Although with technology, we can enhance their lives by helping them stay connected with people that they love and with their activities. So, it's one of those things where like without that technology piece in place, we see decline. With it in place, we see people engaging in their activities, in the things that they love doing, in taking their hobbies to the next level. Have you seen that as well?
Oh yeah, and I think people think of technology as a computer screen, but there's so much more that can be done with the technology that can create engaging opportunities and connections. So yeah.
When you think about resident engagement and resident happiness overall, how does something like LifeLoop engage that aspect of an older adult's well-being?
Well, LifeLoop has a community engagement index where we can identify a resident who's beginning to disengage before social isolation actually takes place. So staff members through the use of AI can identify and prevent the social isolation from actually starting. When they start to see a little bit of a trend, a leading indicator that someone is beginning to not show up for activities or not engage in the content or not having social connections, the community engagement index can let the staff know, and then they can reach out to residents.
At the Smarter Service, we're also really invested in the data component because we're able to tell how people are doing, what their interests are, what we need to focus more on, maybe in an engagement piece. So just keeping that data active and clean usually helps us address the overall bigger picture of what people need help with. And I just think that is an amazing piece that LifeLoop provides because you want to have a pulse on how your residents are doing. You want to be able to gather engagement before someone becomes so isolated for sure. And so I love that you have that aspect. I know you just mentioned a little bit about staff as well and AI. How does your platform work for reducing staff overload?
Well, just AI in general will take away a lot of the menial tasks, the administrative tasks, the paperwork. Typically, staff member will spend hours creating a calendar. With LifeLoop, you can create an activity calendar in minutes instead of hours. A lot of the administrative tasks, taking attendance at activities, can be done with a voice recorder. in a matter of seconds. Onboarding new residents can be done instead of writing a whole life story. It can be recorded and then AI will transfer it into a document. And then you have it all available right in front of you rather than having to go dig through a binder trying to find James's past history or preferences. It's a touch of a button and it's right there.
Yeah, that's so valuable, so important. We're seeing the input of AI more and more throughout senior living. And yes, unfortunately, sometimes the adoption is slow, but the demand is high for sure. Beyond the features that we're seeing today, what's the next frontier of engagement technology that you believe is going to fundamentally redefine how older adults connect with their friends, their families, and their community?
Now, I told you in advance that I'm not a tech person, so this is not coming from a technology point of view. This is coming from more of a personal point of view. I think right now, the technology that we have supports connections and supports engagements. I think the future technology will help create connections and be less of a screen and more of a comprehensive sort of technology that can intuitively understand a person, a more human technology that can read emotions and signs that someone is feeling something or feeling disconnected. Or so don't ask me how that gets done technologically, but that would be my thought for the next step, to be just more human, more in tune to emotions and feelings and anticipate the next step.
I like that. That is so smart. So recently I had the opportunity of interacting with a social robot named Ryan. And Ryan is able to read emotions and interpret voice inflection for mood. Do you see that as being integrated in part of the technology that you're doing at LifeLoop?
I don't see why not. I think it'd be amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, these social robots, at first, they're a little creepy. But the more time you spend with them, I think the more people warm up to them. I don't know how it exactly works in a memory care situation, but I've seen a lot of people enjoy interacting with the robot, not replacing human interaction.
Never.
Yeah, never, but actually reinforcing um, some of the work that the staff is doing. Like, for instance, one of the uses could be that, let's just say a resident wakes up, it's 2 a.m., they head to the gym, the robot's there to interact with them and, give them a workout, whereas a staff member isn't there 24/7. Or on the weekends, when there's not as much staff available, the robot is there to maybe lead a bingo game or something like that.
And I think this goes back to our earlier conversation about, they're not going to want robots making decisions for people. Let's let them decide. Let's let the people get used to interacting with a personable robot and AI and what they can do. And I think having higher expectations for people that, yes, this will work, I think is key.
Yeah, I want to ask you about this. I'm just going to dive a little bit deeper into this piece of where management, let's say, is making decisions for residents, and people are saying that an older adult wouldn't be interested in a robot, wouldn't be interested in using a smartphone, wouldn't be interested in using voice activated technology. Where do you think that stems from?
Almost from their own fears. That we have a lot of people that might be themselves uncomfortable with technology. And I mean, that was one of the big issues when we first started IN2L, was not as much the residents, but as the staff and leadership computers were still new. Now AI technology is still new to a lot of people, and it's slowly being adapted. But if the staff or the leadership is uncomfortable with the technology, then they're going to kind of deflect that onto the residents and say, no, they don't want it. So
Yeah, it's one of those things where I've heard this argument so many times that I just shake my head, and it's almost the same type of argument that I'm hearing lately about the use of AI in senior living. Of course, it's not going to replace human interaction. There's no way that it will. But I'd like to be able to look beyond that. Before we look beyond that, I want to ask you though, in the span of the time that you have been working with older adults and working with LifeLoop, what are some features that just took off that really surprised you?
I would say, well, definitely the touchscreen was was a big game changer. Made things a lot easier than trying to manipulate and learn how to use a mouse.
Mm-hmm.
That was huge. The speed of the internet now, and how quickly, it was a dial up kind of a wait thing, and the connections were bad. Wi-Fi, and we took a long time for all the buildings to have Wi-Fi, so things were really slow. So I think Wi-Fi really was a game changer because it really sped things up, and people weren't waiting for things to happen. Things happen very quickly now. And I just think overall adoption by everybody, everywhere, all the time, you have to get on board. There's no not being connected.
Yeah, I know that towards the end of COVID, there were many buildings that were still not connected. They weren't wired or wireless. People still were unable to maybe stream in their church service or something like that. And it's just astounding how behind a lot of communities were. There were a couple that I was working with that were ahead of the curve. And one in particular is an LCS community called Sagewood here in Phoenix. And they, in fact, were already doing all of their community-wide meetings on Zoom prior to COVID because they just didn't have a big enough space for the whole community to meet in one room. So they trained all of the residents how to use Zoom. And this was in 2018, 2019. In fact, I was teaching in a classroom there at that time. And when everything closed down, the residents taught me how to use Zoom so I could continue to deliver workshops to them. It's just amazing. We'll always have a soft spot in my heart for that. And because it really allowed me to serve so many more people. I also want to ask you, what were some features or a feature that you were so excited about, but didn't work for one reason or another?
I think VR, maybe. I mean, I think VR is amazing. And my son was in the hospital with cancer, and the VR people, they brought it in, and it was able to really relax him during infusions. He's fine, by the way. But the VR, I thought it was amazing. All the, the things that you could see and the visit your hometown. And I really thought this would be really great in connection with IN2L and LifeLoop. And it hasn't taken off as much as I think it should or could. I don't know if it's because sometimes the headsets are too heavy or people feel disoriented, but I think that's a feature that I thought would really take off, and it hasn't as much as I think it should.
Yeah, I know it just physically has some challenges for older adults, right? Yeah, so it's a little bit of a physical barrier for a lot of people. If you were talking to an activities director or a life enrichment coordinator about how they can use technology to work harder, to work smarter, not harder, to fight isolation, what would you say to them?
I would say what you just said. Use the technology to show you where you're needed most. Don't use technology to take over your role. Use it to handle all the tracking, all the menial tasks, all the administrative work. So that frees up your time to make meaningful connections with your residents and your staff, and the volunteers and the families. Don't want to neglect all those people that are involved in your community.
Awesome. And tell me a little bit about the content that you're developing for LifeLoop, please.
Well, right now, if you want to know about our how we kind of combat social isolation with the LifeLoop platform, as a resident is being onboarded, we take the biography, the data, health, just like kind of a whole thing. And like, for example, we have Frank. He comes in, he's 80 something. He's a former engineer. He really enjoyed woodworking. And so we get all that data. It's in his resident profile. It's on your phone, on your tablet, on your screen. The staff, you can see it. You can access it in a second. And the staff starts to see a decline. Like, Frank's not coming to activities anymore. They see it. He's not showing up. He's not having as much reaching out to his family as much. So the AI will identify him and flag him for the staff. Hey, take a look at Frank over here. We've noticed that he's not showing up, or he's not, okay. So there's the data part that you were mentioning. We have the data. Here's the data. He's not showing up. Now what? The LifeLoop platform will take his biographical information and say, hey, look, Frank really likes woodworking. Why don't you offer him this content? We have woodworking tutorials on our IN2L system, or woodworking videos, or why don't you set up a woodworking, birdhouse building activity for Frank? And it kind of directs the staff to go in personally and say, hey, Frank, I noticed you like woodworking. We have this new video. Or, Frank, we have a scouting troop that has some questions about woodworking. Would you like to come in? Would you like to talk to them? So it gathers the data, it presents the data, and then it also makes recommendations for how to use that data to make a better connection. And then Frank goes to the activity. It records that Frank has been to that activity. So now okay, this activity has high impact for Frank. So we're going to include him more in on this activity. So it's a full circle, and it really makes, and back to the staff, freeing up their time to actually go find Frank and know what to do, instead of flipping through the book and what is Frank like? I don't know, I can't find that folder. I forgot what he said. And it can be updated as Frank changes and grows. We didn't know Frank liked poker. Now he really goes to every poker night. That gets added in there. It doesn't have to be his old self. It could be his continuing to grow self, which I think people sometimes neglect.
Yeah, I think so too. That's a great point. People often think, now you're retired, that's it, right? But in your retirement, you can develop all sorts of other skills and interests and hobbies once you're freed up. I saw this firsthand at a community I worked at. There were people who were, and I remember one person in particular, he was the head of the ER staff for years and years and years here in Phoenix. And once he went into retirement, he started sculpting. And he's probably the second or third person I know who typically was in a really stringent, structured career, and then went into the arts in retirement. So I love the fact that people can shift like that, and they have these capabilities and these talents once they're cultivated and nurtured.
Right. Instead of making the assumption, oh, he was a doctor, so he must really want to do medical stuff or be in charge of the first aid kit, or no, let him grow. And that's sometimes where that AI can see, look, he keeps showing up at sculpting. He must really like, let's do more sculpting classes. Let's maybe introduce him to painting or crocheting or something. When you can track and see what he's interested in. And again, that saves the staff a ton of time. You got the quickly attendance taking verbally, that happens very quickly. And so, yeah, it's all about saving the staff time to allow them to have more connections with the residents. And I just like to turn it the other way as well. If you can get life stories and biographies on your staff, and even volunteers, and if they're willing, the family. So you have, a resident from Switzerland and then you see a staff member whose favorite vacation is Switzerland. Hey, Abby, why don't you go in and talk with June about Switzerland? And you're making a very personal connection for both of them. And I think that is, I think really a useful tool, the AI, to use AI that way to identify people's interests, connected, matching interests.
Yeah, I love that. That is a great point. Well, Leslie, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. If people have questions about LifeLoop and everything that you're developing there, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
I would say go to our lifeloop.com would be the best way. Reach out. We've got a lot of people there to help answer any questions, technology questions, sales questions.
You got it. We have it right down there at the bottom of the screen. So if anyone has questions, you can go to lifeloop.com. For those of you that are joining us today, either recorded or live, we just want to thank you so much for your participation and your comments. We will be returning in 2 weeks on the 7th, I believe, of January. We want to wish you all a wonderful holiday. Thank you, everyone, for your encouragement and support and participation. And we will see you back here in the new year. Thank you.
Happy holidays. Thank you, Abby.
You're welcome.